All right, so in this video, we're going to recap some of the key events in the French Revolution that we've been talking about and go from there. As you watch, I would like you to think about what advice you would give King Louis XVI, the King of France at the time of the Revolution. That will be kind of the angle that I want you to look at these events. So the first key event takes place May 5th, 1789, and that's when King Louis called the Estates General to meet. Again, it took a couple of months leading up to that event to elect the representatives for each estate. And again, they were meeting to fix the problems of France. So figure out what to do with the financial problems. Remember, France was in a lot of debt because King Louis sent money and troops and supplies to the Americans in their revolution, and Marie Antoinette was spending a ton of money at home on parties and dresses and wigs. So King Louis calls the Estates General. Representatives come from all over France, and it becomes very clear that the Estates General is unfair to the Third Estate because the Third Estate representatives get one vote, as do the other two estates. So they're always going to be outvoted. When they ask for a change in the voting, King Louis locks the members of the Third Estate out, and they move down the hall to the tennis court, where they swear the tennis court oath, which states they will refuse to leave the tennis court until they have a constitution and better rights for the people of France. So you can see Louis has made a few decisions along the way that weren't so bright. Now, again, the people on the tennis court are the representatives of the Third Estate. Later on, they're joined by the members of the First and Second Estate. But it's going to be a while before they really have true power. Now, in the meantime, the people of France are still starving. There's still a bread shortage. There's still a debt problem. There's famine. So riots start to happen, and the people of Paris decide that they need weapons and ammunition, and so they storm the Bastille prison, where there are guns and ammunitions, and the prison is a hated symbol of the French monarchy. It was seen as oppressive, and that was the prison where you were sent if you spoke out against the king in the Catholic Church. So again, 8,000 angry peasants storm the Bastille. They take the guns, they take the ammunition, they behead the governor or commander of the Bastille, and they chop his head off and put it on a pike and parade through town. This is like the first very violent event of the French Revolution. Happens on July 14th, so about a month or so after King Louis has called the Estates General. And those people are still meeting in Versailles to figure out the new constitution. But here we have the revolution turning violent. At this point, you can't really go back. And the people on the tennis court, who are now called the National Assembly, don't really say anything. They don't condemn this event. They don't tell the peasants to stop. So it kind of feels like this first moment where the Third Estate has really taken power from the king. The next major event, again, it's happening kind of simultaneously, and the Third Estate representatives on the tennis court form the National Assembly. So they call themselves like the representatives of France. Think of this group as like our Congress or Britain's Parliament, where they're representing the people and they make laws for the people. So between 1789 and 1791, so like a couple of years, this group of people is going to make a lot of changes or reforms to France. And we saw in the documentary, a lot of these changes are going to be geared towards making things fairer and more equal for the people of France, kind of like the borrowing ideas from the Age of Enlightenment. So some of the new changes that the National Assembly makes, they say that there are no more estates, so there's no more division in society, like there's no more First Estate, Second Estate, or Third Estate, everyone is equal. The old church lands are taken over. A new money was introduced, but it ends up causing horrible inflation. The last two are pretty important. All tax-paying citizens were given the right to vote. So as long as you paid taxes, you were able to vote. And the king shared power. So this is called a constitutional monarchy, where King Louis still gets to be king, but the lawmaking power is with the National Assembly. So they're the ones who get to make the laws and the rules for France, and King Louis just kind of gets to sit there and take it. He doesn't get to make his own laws, but again, at this point, he's still alive and he's still the King of France. Now, right around this time, the leaders of the French Revolution declare that there should be increased freedom of press. So the newspapers are able to print freely and say whatever they want, and this is where Marat, the guy in the bathtub, starts to print really kind of dangerous information, and he says that the king is gathering an army to kind of take back power, and we have the Women's March on Versailles. So this is October in 1789. So kind of backtracking a little bit. Still after the storming of the Bastille, what we see is mobs of peasant women, and these are led by the fisherwomen. So they've got long, wicked knives. They march on Versailles, and in the midst of all this chaos, they demand King Louis come to Paris so that they can keep an eye on him. He obviously refuses, and so the mobs of angry peasants break into the palace and start running through the halls, screaming for the queen's head. She barely escapes, but ultimately the king and queen are captured, and they are forced to move to Paris, where they're going to live kind of basically under house arrest. Again, at this point, King Louis and Marie Antoinette are still king and queen of France, but they don't have a say in the government like they used to. But again, they're still alive, they're still with their family. So the king and queen are forced to move to Paris. Now, if you think about it, King Louis is not going to like up giving power. At this time in Europe, most rulers in Europe had total power of their country, or absolute monarchy. England was a little different. They had to share power with the Parliament, going back to Magna Carta back in 1215, which we talked about earlier in the year. But King Louis is going to not like this idea that he has to share power. And so rumors start spreading that he and Queen Marie Antoinette are writing to other countries in Europe to help them. Now, the last main event that I want to talk about in terms of King Louis's decisions is the flight to Varennes. So in June 20th, 1971, King Louis and Marie Antoinette and their family flee Paris, so they flee house arrest, and they travel to the border of France, the border that France shares with Austria. Remember, Marie Antoinette was originally from Austria, so it makes sense that they would try to flee to her home country. Now, the king and queen are dressed as servants, but they take a very fancy-looking carriage that servants would not be taking. So they make a few poor choices along the way, and they're stopped in the town of Varennes, and the people there recognize them as the king and queen. And, at first the king is like, oh, we're saved, the people love us, but he completely misreads the situation, and his family ends up getting captured by revolutionaries and then brought back to Paris, where people lose all trust in the monarchy, and King Louis loses whatever power he had left is just completely gone at this point. Now, again, your homework is thinking about what advice you would give King Louis at this point in the French Revolution, or at any point leading up to this point.